All right, well, we are going to take a look today at recruiting and sales management strategies. And it's come up, a lot of you are at the points where either you're looking at hiring your first salesperson, or you've got a situation where you've got the, as I call it, inmates running the asylum, and the salespeople are, maybe dancing to their own drum beat. And if you're going to put in some more management guidelines and using scorecards and trying to track activities, there's always the possibility that somebody will not engage, won't get it what you're trying to do, and will walk away and quit on you or threaten to quit. And so in order for you to take control of your own destiny, you have to have a good recruiting process in place. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through today the recruiting process that I use. Jeremy, I know you just went through, you're in the middle actually of hiring somebody. You just hired someone right now. And Chris, you've done some of this in the past as well. The way I look at recruiting is that it sort of never stops. You're always looking for your next salesperson, especially if you have a larger sales team. You have your top performers, then you have your middle, and then you have your bottom performers. So as a sales manager, your goal is always just to provide support for the top people, training and reinforcement for the middle people, trying to move them up to the top, and then the bottom people, it's more or less keep them on a short lease. 60-day programs with expectations, and if expectations aren't met, you have to move on. In sales management, I was taught that you never fire anybody. They de-hire themselves. So as soon as you set clear expectations, they will either choose to meet or exceed those expectations, or they're telling you that they don't want to work for your company. So it's pretty simple. I'm going to jump in here first and foremost into this program, and I'm going to get into hiring right now, and just looking at some of the traits of people we hire for positive and negative traits. A little quote here by H. Ross Perot, a Texas guy, I believe, right, Ted? Eagles don't flock if you find them one at a time. And that's the thing with salespeople. Usually when someone quits on you and you have to hire someone, oftentimes is the worst time to hire someone, because you will skip best practices. You maybe will hire too quickly, and hiring the wrong salesperson can cost you obviously hundreds of thousands of dollars in lost opportunities or missed opportunities. So positive and negative traits that you look for. First of all, from a positive traits, I always like to find somebody that has a sales background. Not necessarily industry experience, but understands the sales process just from a general perspective. I also look for people, obviously, that are very moldable, and most importantly, they have a PhD. Now, for those of you who haven't heard that expression before, PhD stands for poor, hungry, and driven. We're not looking for someone that has a real PhD, but they're poor, hungry, and driven. In other words, they're very motivated to come in and do what it takes. Now, negative attributes that I look at, the first thing is the realtor looking for a safety net. The market turned, things got hard, they didn't adapt, they've been in business for 20 years selling used homes, and all of a sudden now they think that jumping on board with you as a builder is you're their savior. So I tried to avoid that. People that think they know it all, you've got to be very concerned with, top producers. There's always the king bee and queen bee syndrome that you can be dealing with. People that don't try to sell you on why they should be working for you. In other words, they sort of expect you to sell them. Prima donnas, that sort of thing. So I always gravitate towards people that are more raw, in that they've got a good base of a background, maybe not heavily in our industry, but they are excited, they're willing to learn, they're technologically savvy. I look for that, and I'll show you one of the ways that we go through that, but they're technologically savvy, because obviously today's consumers are, so you got to have someone that can match that or exceed what their expectations are. And I look for people that are humble. Good team players are also important too. Because you can have, if you have a sales team and you've got somebody that's unhappy, is sort of a bad apple, they can come in and they can really poison the other people. So you got to be very careful of that. It's not unusual to go through 50, 60, 70. I've gone through 150 resumes to find one person. So again, this particular saying here, eagles don't fly, found one at a time, is absolutely true. And hiring that right person with the right skill set is the most important thing you'll do when you hire. So previous sales experience we talked about can be out of the industry or could be in a affiliate industry. So somebody that maybe is in housing but not necessarily has new home sales experience or perhaps renovation sales experience. One of the interesting things I found is that when I'm reviewing resumes, that when somebody did not put together a cover letter for me, I never hired them. And it was just because just going through the resumes or actually getting deeper in the process, I never hired them. So it's one of the first clues is that if you don't have a cover letter, if they haven't sent in a cover letter, and they can't even take the time to do that, a personalized cover letter, probably not a good candidate. Industry experience you got to be aware of. We've already discussed that. So this is my process I go through, and I have resources available for you on Game Day Coaching, which I will go into next. First of all, online ads. If you're going to do a paid ad, careerbuilder.com has been the best for me. They're not cheap, $430 a month. It's a 30-day ad, but I found I get better quality people on careerbuilder.com than monster.com. Craigslist, or what is it, Quinn, that you guys have in Utah? What's it called?
We have one called KSL.com. It's just a local TV station.
Yeah, KSL.
Yeah,
okay.
KSL.com.
Yeah, so that would be the equivalent of Craigslist. But, you know, with Craigslist or KSL like that, you get a little bit of everything. But I have found decent people on Craigslist. So it's the ads are free. You just got to make sure that you're updating them and reposting them fairly often. In Craigslist, for instance, there is a sales section and there's a real estate section. So post in both of them. But paid, if you're really going to do a good search, do a paid search with Career Builder. Monster is a little bit less, you'll find, but the quality is not as high. Okay, resume screening. There's a little saying out there that says that the best somebody will ever look is on their resume. And you think about that. I mean, if you're out there and you want a job and, you know, you have complete 100% control of what's on your resume, you know, to an extent, but how it's formatted, spelling errors, punctuation, that sort of thing. And if someone comes in and they've got a sloppy resume, I don't automatically discount it, but I do give it serious demerits. Because if they can't take the time, you know, to fix simple formatting or punctuation errors, and you know, and they're trying to get a job with me, that means like, okay, what else are they going to not take the time on if I were to hire this person? So that's what I usually look for: is a good, strong cover letter and a well-formatted, punctually correct resume. I also look for holes in the resume. So as an example, Jeremy just hired a new guy who had a 2-year hole in his resume, and I looked at it and I said, well, the resume looks great, but what did he do between 2006 and 08? Well, we followed up with a question, and you know, he answered it, but I want to know, you know, why someone didn't put there. Obviously, you know, what I'm looking for is that they were at a certain employer, they screwed up, they did something bad, they want to try to hide that. I want to figure out what happened there. So pre-interview questionnaire. This, by far, is the most important part of the hiring process, pre-interview questionnaire. And I'll show you what it is, but what happens is you get resumes in, you review them, and then if somebody wants to, say, have a face-to-face interview with you, there's a phone ringing in the background. Could you mute yourself, whoever has that phone ringing in the background? Okay, thank you. Pre-interview questionnaire. It's about 15, 20 questions of things that you want to know about the person prior to doing a phone interview. And what I found is that about 80% of the applicants will not fill this out. So not only am I looking for the answers I get back, I'm also screening. I'm also, filtering out people that are too lazy to answer a few questions. The other thing that the pre-interview questionnaire does is it forces someone to actually go in and edit a Word document, resave it, format it, and send it back to me. So they've got to be, have a little bit of technical skills on the computer to do it. Red flags here, people will print it out. They will handwrite their answers in there, scan it, and send it back to you. And I've even had people call my office asking for my fax number. My directions specifically say, fill this out and email it back to me. So I'm also looking at, can people follow directions by filling this out? But this is by far the best filter, the pre-interview questionnaire. Now, the phone interview is next. I want to get to them on the phone. I want to find out what their phone skills are. I'll schedule a time to talk to them. Did they keep their time? What's their tone of voice like? I'll ask a lot of the same questions on the pre-interview questionnaire. I'll go back and I'll maybe dig a little deeper into some answers there. And it's a pre-screening that I would do before I ever get in front of somebody. The face-to-face interview is next. Now, the face-to-face interview, you want to specifically time this during part of the day. So I've got a series of questions that I'll give you. But what I like to do is I'm always going to do a two-part interview process, a first and second. So I want to make sure I meet with people at different times of the day. I want to know, are they good in the morning and the afternoon, or is there something wrong with them in the afternoon but they're okay in the morning? So I'll specifically schedule it for either first thing in the morning or later in the day for the face-to-face interview. And it's also good to have other people in your organization interview them separately from you. Jeremy, you guys just went through Jim when you hired him. He drove up from Texas, was here for a day, so you sort of had a marathon interview session. But how many individual interviews did you do? Was it 4 or 5?
1, 2, 3, 4 with owners, and then 1 salesperson, so 5.
So 5 individually, and then you came back, I think, in the afternoon, and you had more of a group interview because he was here for the day. The process of having him interview with multiple people is you're trying to break them. Because again, people usually in the first interview, they're going to tell you what they think you want to hear, and they're going to sort of have their story down. But then if you have the same people ask similar questions as you go throughout the process, if they're hiding something or if they're a weak point in something, they're trying to let you find out, it will come out in that interview process. Okay, the DISC personality profile. DISC, I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but DISC personality profile is an online profile where you can find out what somebody's core personality is. The DISC stands for, D is for dominance, I is for influence, S is steadiness, C is conscientiousness. If you want to hire an estimator, you want someone who's conscientious, not if you want to hire a salesperson, you want someone that's more dominant or has a stronger influence with people. Most salespeople will be a high I, meaning their primary way of selling is to try to influence people. So there's certain personality profiles that you want to avoid. Someone who has low dominance or low influence, high steadiness or conscientiousness. These people are not risk takers. They're also too concerned about making sure everything's perfect, and so they tend not to close as they should. The influencers, you have to deal with them. The problem with most influencers is their paperwork is horrendous, and they might be good with working with people, building the relationships, that sort of thing, but you have to keep a real close eye on them. The ideal salesperson will be dominant first, influence second. Okay, so we talked about the second interview with another person from your company. I would do it in a different part of the day. And then if that goes well, then I would go to the reference check. And the other thing that I just did when I was helping Jeremy hire his most recent salesperson is I went back and I got the candidates list of references, but then going through their resume, I asked for additional references based on previous employers and actually talked to 2 additional ones so that were not planned. That is very, very important, is if you can come up with additional references that they didn't talk about and get some feedback from them. Finally, background and or drug check. Now, some communities you have to do a drug check. I have one client that he automatically does a drug check for every single employee. Background check is just where you can check credit history, criminal history, just to make sure that these people are on the straight and narrow. So that is the 9-part hiring process. So you can see where you can start with 50 or 60 or 70 or 100 resumes and narrow it down to where you're only sitting down with maybe 2 or 3. And then of those 2 or 3, you would go through with a second interview, a personality profile, reference, and background check. Questions or thoughts on this process?
I've got a question, Rick,
Yeah.
about the disc profile. Where would we go about getting that test?
You can get it through me. It's about I took some training and got signed up to do it so I can offer it. There's a couple different ones you can do. One's $50, one is $75. The new one, the $75 one, is something that where it shows them is you as a sales manager or owner, you can do your own test, and then anybody you hire, you can actually compare them to your personality style, and so you can determine if there would be a complementary personality or a conflicting personality. What I tell people about the DISC profile, Chris, is that it will not tell you who to hire, it will tell you who not to hire.
Okay.
So it's a cheap way of figuring out if you've got the right candidate.
So just do a Google search if we're going to go outside on that and find a company, or if we have a candidate, we get in contact with you.
Yeah, if you have a candidate, get in contact with me. What I'll do is I just go up and I send them a link. It's all online. They'll fill it out, and then the report can be emailed to you and the candidate. And then what I'll do is I'll give you a heads up on the report if they look like they're okay or if there's an issue.
Okay. How about the other question? Sorry to monopolize the time here, but what if I don't have 100 people applying for the position?
You don't have to. Jeremy's recent hire, I don't know, Jeremy, as far as resume, I mean, this guy's resume came in back in December.
Yeah.
But
we ran one on Career Builder and Craigslist, and I don't know, probably leaned through 50 of them, and we hired somebody earlier this year, so we kind of stopped, and then we needed to hire somebody again. We looked back the resumes we had from the beginning of the year, and he was still interested. So
yeah, you can run the ad continuously. You don't have to go through 100. So sometimes you'll find somebody pretty good. This particular guy that Jeremy hired had already filled out the pre-interview, and Jeremy forwarded it to me, and I read it, and I said, "Wow, this guy's really very strong." And so then I helped going and doing some of the phone interviewing and did the DISC profile on him and that sort of thing, and reference check, and just a real solid candidate. So it doesn't necessarily take 100. That's why you always want to keep an ad going, Chris.
Okay.
Jeremy, you still got an ad going. I've got an ad going right now on Craigslist. I've got some sample ads for you guys that you can use. Even if you're not ready to hire someone right now, just keep an ad going, because you never know when that really good candidate comes along. You're like, whoa, too good of a person to let go. Okay, then you go back to your sales team and say, okay, who's struggling? And there's always somebody there that maybe could be doing better, or you want to expand into a new area, and then you've got your candidate lined up. It's not unusual for candidates to be looking for a new job for over a year. So it's not like if you run an ad in March, it's not going to be good in November. You're still going to find people that will come on board.
Okay.
Any other thoughts on this? Okay, let me show you where the resources are for all this. On Game Day Coaching, you're going to click on Key Activities for Sales Success, and you're going to come to the Sales Management area. And the first 2 videos here are on hiring. So you see video number 1, video number 2. These are pretty much a copy of what I'm talking about right now. Now, when you click on this button right here to download the transcript, you're going to get access to everything that I've got. So I've got sample employment ads right here, both for remodeling and home builder. These are for online ads. Never advertised in the paper, by the way. Pre-interview questions. So this is the email copy you can send out to somebody. This is the instructions that you would send out. And then here's the questionnaires. If you're interviewing for a remodeling position and somebody does not have experience, you would use this one. If they've got experience, you go here. And same thing for new home. Somebody with no experience or someone with experience. Now, hiring people with experience is fine. You just have to be real careful it's not the wrong kind of experience. And then here we have phone interview questions and person-to-person questions that you can download. So that's all available to you for download. And there's a script here of some of the things I've talked about as well. All right, I'm going to keep moving on. So at this point, let's say you've gone through the process, you found somebody that you want to hire, and you go ahead and make that hire. So now the question is, okay, I've got them hired. How in the heck do I train this person? And then the final part we'll get into is the ongoing sales management. Your current salespeople, and if you haven't hired a salesperson before, you know you're sort of you'll put it off as long as possible because you're thinking like, how am I going to start managing a salesperson? And I'll go through how you do that. It doesn't have to certainly take up a whole lot of your time. Okay, first 60 days after you hire someone. What I like to do is I put in the salesperson agreement, or whether it's, and I have these too, by the way, if I have them for independent contractors and employees. But a salesperson agreement is I'll put a clause in there that states that they have to pass a sales readiness quiz. And sales readiness quiz, I want them to do it in 60 days. Now, 2 ways to go about it. One is that you pay them a reduced commission until they pass the quiz. The guy that Jeremy just hired didn't like that, and so what Jeremy negotiated was if the quiz is not passed in 60 days, that he gets money taken out of his check, his commission check, to the tune of about $3,000 a commission until it is passed. We want to give them all the motivation in the world to get this thing done as soon as possible. Then I've got a 30-day preparation guide. The 30-day prep guide is all about understanding what collateral materials you're using, understanding your sales environment, understanding their office setup, and you as a builder. Looking at also your I'm going to go back here. Looking at also your communities that you build in, competing communities, competing builders, competing remodelers, used homes. Understanding what the used home market is there, learning about major employers, that sort of thing. It's really just to inundate them with not inundate's not the right word, but basically let them absorb your operation really quickly. So I'm going to, again, go back into game day coaching. And first of all, I'm going to show you the sales readiness quiz. So this is for, I think, home builder right here. Yeah. There's 16 questions, and this just follows the sales process, beginning with greeting and going all the way through follow-up strategies. Closing, objections are all in here. And the sales readiness quiz is a combination of where they have to, say, script out an answer, so they would write an answer and how they would potentially greet someone. They would write out your builder story. They understand that. They would learn your marketing message. They would have to understand the 7 areas of needs analysis and the questions they want to answer. And then there's also part of it that they would actually have to role play with you. So they would have to prove to you, you're the buyer, and they're going to sit down and they're going to be able to, follow your sales process. So 16 questions right here. All of these have video tutorials for them, and they all also have downloadable materials. I've answered every single question for them in here. So it's not like they have to really recreate the wheel. They just have to learn, they memorize some of the scripts, and then through the process of actually role-playing, they will internalize those, And then when they're ready to sell, they're personalized. So it's them talking, but they understand the process that they need to follow. So right here is the actual quiz that you can download, and then this is all how to get the answers for the 16 questions. So this is designed where someone can do this on their own. They can work on 11 o'clock at night or 11 o'clock in the morning. You'd have to come up with them for specific times, so they would have to present information to you. Now, so that is home builders, and down here is remodelers. And again, I'm on key activities for sales success in the members area, and then this is the area for remodelers. Remodelers is not as many questions because you don't have to deal with dirt, so you don't have the home site reservation process and that sort of thing. So there's 9 or 10 here. Okay, and then I just added this. This is the prep guide for new hires. There's one here for remodeling, and there's one here for new homes. Again, this is where somebody can grab this guide, and they can go through, and it tells them they need to learn your purchase agreement. They need to get all your forms. They need to know when the models are open or when the hours are at the office. They need to understand, buyers' personality types, that sort of thing. So it's more infrastructure learning, not necessarily sales stuff, but it's things that they need to know anyway. And so I have 30 days on here because this stuff is easier. It's just a matter of figuring out where you keep the plans in the office, things like that. All right, thoughts or questions on the first 60 days of training? Hearing none, we'll keep moving. So now let's talk about ongoing management. One of the most critical things you can do is not use making a sale as your only metric of a successful salesperson. That's normally what happens is builders are busy. They don't have a good training process, and so therefore they will either avoid hiring somebody or they will hang on to bad salespeople for way too long. You have to constantly be measuring people, and this goes into the scorecard, which Rune and I are working on right now. But what are they doing each and every week? What activities are they performing each and every week? What's their success at those activities? And what is their plan for every one of their A prospects to move them forward into the sales process? So for ongoing management, the most important thing you can do is a planned encounter. And Chris, I'm probably going to defer to you because I know that you've got into this heavily. But a planned encounter would be let's just say it's a 30-minute conversation you have one-on-one with your salesperson each week. And what you're going to review are the activities. What activities did they perform that week? And then I also want to have a next step strategy session with my A prospects. Not you telling them what the next step should be, but they telling you. Here's my A prospects. You can go into Ubix and any of your salespeople and you can look up what their A prospects are. But then they would say, okay, for the Smiths, my next step is this. For the Johnsons, my next step is this. I'm having some trouble with the McDonald's. This is what came up. And so then you would brainstorm together as what are the things you can do to try to keep the sale moving forward. But A prospect, next step. And then finally, when I get to the weekly activities, if somebody is getting stuck, let's just say they're having a bunch of first meetings with people, but they're not getting to the second. Or they're having second meetings and they're not getting to the third. You know there's an issue with their sales process. So at that point, what you need to do is you need to say, okay, what's going on, with your second meetings? You had 3 second meetings last week. None of them went forward. What happened? And you would go down and break down what's going on, and then you could role play that situation. Well, I got this objection. I didn't know how to handle it. Or, I didn't do a good job of setting up the value proposition. Or I presented pricing too fast. Whatever it is, but you dig into that. And then they would come back the next week and they would role play one-on-one with you. Okay, go ahead and tell me, how would you do this? And with role playing, it's always a lot easier for people to do it one-on-one than in a group situation. So Chris, anything else you want to, I know you've worked very hard on this, anything else you want to add to what you're doing with your planned encounters?
Well, I do, everything you've talked about. I've also introduced what I call an inventory home checklist and a neighborhood checklist. I just go through and make sure certain things are happening in the neighborhood each week, and then whatever inventory homes they have listed, I go through and make sure there's, just the basics, flyers in the box, online advertisement, MLS advertisement, etc. So I have a checklist on each of those as well, and it usually ends up being an hour.
Okay. Do you do them face to face, or do you do them over the phone?
Most always face to face.
Okay, that's ideal. It's and because you need to go out, you go out to their model and make sure that the model is it's clean, it looks good, the neighborhood looks good, the signage is up, that sort of thing. So it's good for you.
And it has actually helped as well to have a set time with each salesperson each week, so they know and can anticipate it that it's happening.
Yep. And the primary thing you review is their activities and what their next step is in the process. But I like the idea of going through inventory and some of those other checklists. So thank you. Okay, so summary simply: hire hard, manage easy. I'm sorry,
Chris?
Yeah, go ahead, Jeremy.
Could I ask Chris a question?
Sure.
Chris, I know you said you go out and meet face-to-face with them. Is it after the weekend traffic, so you meet with them on a Monday, Tuesday, so you can go over strategies so they have it during the week, or is it usually late in the week when they're sitting on the models?
No, it's usually early on in the week. I have a Tuesday and a Wednesdays that I do all my. I have my Mondays with the owners of the company, and then Tuesdays, Wednesdays with salespeople.
All right, perfect. Thanks.
Training's got to be ongoing, and most importantly, you've got to measure what you manage. You've got to have a way to know what these people are doing each week and have a management tool to help them. And classic example, I guess I would finish up with this, was one of Jeremy's salespeople, Mary, who came on, who had a good skill set but just didn't understand the design build sales process. And because we had a weekly activity report, and we were measuring everything she was doing, including going into Ubix and looking at how she was using that, we could identify where her shortcomings were, train her, and have her go through the role play process. And in the last probably 8 weeks, her activity has dramatically picked up. She's had some sales. She's gotten a lot more appointments. She's got some reservations, moved some people into design. It's made all the difference in the world versus just waiting for her to make a sale or not make a sale. What I want to finish up with is I'm going to pull open activity reports. I'm not sure how many of you have seen these or are using them, but starting with single family, what Runa and I are in the process of doing right now is actually taking this report and converting it so it's all in Ubix. But it's also good for you to understand, what we're tracking on this report and why we're tracking it. So it's a simple Excel spreadsheet. There's 3 tabs here. The first thing the salesperson does is they will come down here, and they will you can put it in a drop-down menu. They'll pick what community they're in. They'll pop their name in here. Week beginning is always on Monday, and week ending is always on Sunday. So they'll put that week in here and the month. Then they'll go through their leads or prospects. Okay, so what traffic did I get, and where did it come from? Again, this is for new homes. Any sales they had, planned deposits, or reservations, and then they can put in general comments here. This is usually where people will talk, I'll ask them to put, list out all your A prospects and what the next step is with each of them. Cancellations come down here, which we don't like those, but unfortunately they do happen. Now, the main part of this, which will be part of the scorecard, is the sales process. So what we've done is I've gone and I've put together metrics for if you want to get 1 or 2 sales per month. And they tell us, okay, how many days did you work for the week? How many hours for the week? How many sales did you get for the week? And if you got a sale, what kind of sale was it? Referral, co-broke, self-generated walk-in, or internet. Now, in the hot prospects section, I want to know, okay, how many people did you fully qualify? How many demonstrations or people did you cite? Did you, walking on the home sites, taking them to the available home? Then, really important, most importantly, is probably the appointments. And what we're showing for a goal, if we're going to sell 1 a month, is we want to have 1.5 first appointments per week, 1 second, and 1 third. Now, if you correlate this is simply the initial consultation, the first sit-down meeting, not the first model home visit or first contact, but the first sit-down meeting. This is normally a home site reservation, and then this should be a planned deposit. The goal is that, what I want to know is that if you met with someone 3 times and you don't have money yet, what happened? 3 meetings is a lot of work. You're figuring you're averaging 3 to 4 hours per meeting between preparation time, if you have drive time, and actual meeting time. But why don't you have money yet? What went wrong? Okay, was it an objection you couldn't handle? Was it, I want to find out the reason. And what I normally find out is what I shoot for, actually as a goal from a metric, is that if I have a salesperson and they have 5 A prospects, ultimately I want 50% of those to go to contract. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to weed out who's not going to buy from me. So it's not unusual to have, maybe you've got 10 A prospects or 8 A prospects or maybe 15 A prospects you're working with. The goal is always to weed out who's not going to buy. But we do that through appointments. Needs analysis, demonstration, creating value. Do they, is it a good fit? And we ask as for the soft close along the way, which again is simply, would you consider hiring us? Let's reserve the home site. Let's go into design. Or in this case, Chris, for Hallmark, this is the 3rd appointment, should probably be the purchase agreement. Okay, then I want to know follow-up phone calls, and I only count phone calls that are completed. How many cards or letters, emails? How many people did they get to the lender this week? Then I have my realtor section. I have my past customer section. I have my personal development section. So what I tell the salesperson to do is, look, just take this 2 pieces of paper, print them out, keep them with you, and then on Sunday, if you're working the model on Sunday, or if Saturday is the last day, whatever it is, Friday for that matter, you summarize this on the Excel spreadsheet and you email it to me. And then I want to have it by Monday at the latest. So on Monday, Chris is going to do his plan to counters on Tuesdays or Wednesdays. So on Monday, Chris gets all his activity reports. He can review them, understand what's been happening, and so when he goes and meets with the people, he has an idea of what happened for the previous week. So that's home building, and I've got one here for remodeling. Very, very similar. Obviously a little bit different process, but this has all been configured. This already talks about initial consultations, design consultations, and 3rd appointments right here. Business referral partners versus realtors. Past customers are still very important, and personal development. So for those of you that are not using these right now and you have salespeople, I would tell you right now today is I would introduce these and make it mandatory that you are getting this stuff once per week. It's not that much to ask. It's not that big of a deal. You're simply helping them identify what's going on, where their weak points are, and helping them put together more sales. Any last thoughts or questions on this activity reports?
And it's on game day coaching.
Yes, if you go, I'll show you where these are as well. I'm still in the sales management section. So here I've got an overview of the home builder weekly sales activities and metrics, part 2 and part 3. So this is all for home builder stuff, and then I've got remodeler right here. So you can download those Excel spreadsheets. I would use these myself as well. If I'm selling myself, I want to be tracking. Am I spending enough time focusing on the activities I need to focus on to make the sale happen? Jeremy, you and Chris, I think you're still using the activity reports, correct?
We are.
Yeah, I know you are, Jeremy. Chris, are you still using these? Did I lose Chris?
No, I'm sorry. We are. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And when you first asked the salespeople to do this, did you get a lot of flack? Did they kind of give some pushback? They didn't want to do it. Chris, are you there? Oh, we lost Chris. I'm sorry. Well, Jeremy, you're doing it actively, I know. Quinn, do you guys do anything like this? Do you have any sort of activity that's turned in from your salespeople each week?
Not really. I know that we have in the past before my time here. And I know they were pretty good about keeping up on it, Jed was, but for the last, since I've been here, which has been almost 2 years, we haven't done anything like this to really keep, and you know what, we really need to, especially, you know, I mean, I talked to you last week about kind of some of our agent activity and how they're, you know, they're not, you know, some of our issues, and
Right.
you know, and I'd really like to do something about that, and you know, try to get them more interested and active and know what they're doing out when they're, you know, out in the field and whatnot. And we've got a communication issue here, so anything that we can do to help that.
Yeah, well, I left a message for Jed yesterday, so why don't you make a note to set up a time to talk to me, and we can talk specifically more about your situation. Maybe we got to get Bruce involved too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, and it's not, you know, it's not a really necessarily a bad situation. It's just some things definitely need to change, and I think, yeah, it definitely needs to be for the better. For
It's
sure.
it's a control issue. It's really, and I can say about the inmates running the asylum. The problem is that you as the owner of a company, it's your money at risk.
Right.
And you've got salespeople that don't have anything invested besides their time. And if you don't know what's happening out in the field with your salespeople, you're the one that ultimately is out to hang. So I know, Jeremy, you've been adamant about it with all your salespeople. And once salespeople start doing it, it just becomes automatic. They just do it. But you've got to know what's going on. And Chris, you guys, I know when you started doing your planned encounters and you started getting more involved, you figured out you've got some closing issues with some of your salespeople, or they were demonstrating too fast, or they were, you know, using the inventory homes or model home as a crutch to try to make the sale. You got real involved, getting on site and getting involved with some of these, and your sales have jumped up pretty dramatically over the last 6 months because of that. So I know you've seen some real success with following this process with your stuff.
Yeah, and I would, you know, I'd love to. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'd love to, you know, get more used to this and get into this so that, you know, we can really hopefully make some better things happen. So
I would say, just from an owner standpoint, or even from a sales manager standpoint, I would say it's the only way and best way to manage your salespeople. It's to know exactly what they're doing, to know exactly how many all that stuff.
Well, I don't know if you guys have had problems with this, but, you know, one of our biggest problems, and I don't know, maybe this has helped those situations, but, one of our problems is that's not me, is it?
Jeez. I don't think so. I don't know where that's coming from. I don't know, that's really weird. I can't. Okay, now we're done.
Anyways, what I was just saying is, you know, one of our biggest problems is, you know, our salespeople, being that, you know, they're only up in our corporate office, you know, a couple days a week for, you know, in and out type business, but, you know, they kind of get in their mentality of, I'm on my own, and so I'm going to do my own thing, and I'm going to do it the way I want to do it, and nobody's going to tell me otherwise. And that's kind of what we've got going on out there, and so we have a lot of headbutting happening, especially in sales meetings. And one person has one idea on one thing, and another person has a completely different idea on the same thing, and it makes things almost impossible. So
I just went through that.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not the only one.
I call it the agent mutiny.
Oh,
Yeah.
Good.
That happens. I mean, the best thing I've done, at least, is draw a line in the sand, set clear expectations. And Rick suggested a while back, you got to institute some sort of like a demerit or a punishment. And what's the word great for me is I'm holding back the leads from people who aren't doing what I'm asking them to do.
Yeah.
That's the step before before we terminate the relationship. Is, you know, if you're not going to do what we're asking you to do, you don't get leads this week. Sorry, I'm going to pass them on to those people who are.
Right. And that's exactly what me and Rick were talking about last week is, you know, it's hard, but, you know, I think Jed is hesitant because he doesn't want to lose these people, and I think he's worried that if we start to hold back leads and, you know, instigate some kind of punishment, then, you know, people are there is going to be, you know, maybe some kind of uprising, and I think he's a little concerned about that. So I'm really trying, but.
And that's why you got to go back. You got to have a recruiting process in place. Because, again, I go back to the inmates running the asylum. You know, if the salespeople are running the show,
oh, and they completely are.
yeah, then, okay, so then you go to the bank, you put up the money, you buy the land, you build the model homes. That's fine. You can do things the way you want to do. But it's a top-down leadership thing, which is probably why we got to have a conversation with Bruce and Jed and just, you know, say that, you know, from a leadership standpoint, this is what we're doing. You know, you know, we're doing this to make you successful and make us successful. But we understand that if you don't want to do this, that's your choice. That's okay. It's just that we're going in a different direction. There's too much risk. There's too much exposure out there not to know what's going on. Yep. That's great. Well, I did record this. I'm actually going to stop it right now, so I will have the recording available.